Then he asked me, okay, you take the subject you want. I said, okay, then that's an interesting point because we went through, along with our journey of entrepreneurship, we went through a journey of succession planning. It had happened in 3 levels, so I would probably like to speak about it for a little while. So it's important for me that I share my experience because I'm sure there are some of the elders in this August gathering who probably would be going through the similar dilemma as to how we should do succession planning. To talk about what we have done in our journey, I would like to talk a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey simply because I heard during the day and when we were introduced about the humble beginning. I'm sure most of the generations who came from Uru to Bombay, I'm talking about 30, 40, 50 years ago, also had the same humble beginning. Mr. Shashikiran Shetty talking about coming from Bantwal after BCom and wondering whether to join shipping corporation or start his own journey. Like many of you have come. So I think everybody has a story to tell in our own humble way. So I have a story to tell as well today evening. So I would spend little time on my journey, and then I'll probably start on the succession planning part. Like I think most of us here, we are all from a middle class family. My father was what we call as a licentiated Indian medicine practitioner. He practiced medicine but never charged. So you would understand what his economic scenario was. He was a landlord with a lot of lands, and that is what our livelihood was. And it so happened, the Tenancy Act that happened way back in late 60s and 70s. He lost everything. So he was a landlord without any land, but he was sort of kept in a pedestal, so he had to, sort of have that lifestyle, which is impossible to manage, right, with a medical practice where he never charged. So I had a good engineering degree. It was introduced as a rank student. Yes, I was. And that made me to get a scholarship to go to Canada to do my master's in industrial engineering. My thought process was, okay, I was good in my class, I was number 1 in the class and university rank and all that, fine. How good am I in the global scene? Am I as good as I am sort of made out to be in India? So that was a great experience to go to Canada and do my master's. I went only for that, to see how good I am. Not really to settle down. But if you really look back in those days, I think many Indian students who went abroad never came back. I would say 9 out of 10 decided to stay on, had a great job. So did I. I had a fantastic job offer in San Francisco. Even today, my friend who stays there and who got me that job says that, Ajit, in those days, you were a bloody fool to go back to India. In 1984, the economic reforms had not started in India. It started in 1991 when Mr. Narasimha Rao became the Prime Minister. So the entire process of studying, having a job, but not staying and coming back was a big challenge for my family as well. They said, but I said, no, I think I know I can do better things. So I think that was the courage of conviction that I had to get back to India and start in my own small way. Even when I came back again, my parents said that work for a couple of years and blah, blah, blah. And I must say that I had a wonderful job offer from Philips in Pune with a quarters given. But I said no. So that was the time I think TVS had launched their two-wheeler called In Suzuki, and they were importing a lot of parts. And they were indigenizing the imported content. So we sort of stepped in at that time, went to meet TVS, and they gave us a wonderful opportunity to start the cable plant that we had. Even at that time, we went very professionally. We did a national survey, we saw what is the potential for this product, and said, yes, this is one that we wanted to do. So the entire project cost was 62 lakhs, and as a family, we had to raise 6 lakhs. Where is 6 lakhs for me? The entire family, We're all from the middle class again. So I went around talking to every one of my uncle, aunt, great aunt, my cousin, my niece, nephew, whoever could think of putting that 2,000, 5,000 rupees. We urged them to take a chance on me because I was here with no experience, don't know what cable is, but I'm telling that I'm setting up a small scale industry. They all believed me. Like today, nearly 50,000 shareholders believe in us. They believed in those days that there is a potential. So with that, we started Suprajit. Supriya is my dear wife. She is a dentist, very successful. She has got no much time here. Time for me, so she didn't come with me, and my apologies. But like most of you who had a humble beginning coming all the way from Uru to here, we all have taken what they famously said as a road less traveled by. And that has made the difference. Today I came with a driver from Uru who came with SLC pass. Today his daughter is in TCS, son is in some shipping. And he has bought a house in the suburb of Mumbai. That is the story. But in its own small way, every one of us have our stories. So this is my story. We had a great support from TVS. And with that, we started Suprajit. And it has made its mark over the years. I don't want to spend much time. We make cables, halogen lamps. Somebody mentioned we are the largest in two-wheeler cables. Actually, today, after the recent acquisition of last week, we're probably the largest cable maker in the world today. So, whom we supply? We supply to the best-in-class, the Audis of the world, Mercedes, BMWs. If you're driving any of those cars, we certainly will have one of our products in that, which you will not see. Again, just as I said, I am under the radar. Our cables are also under the hood. Nobody sees where we are. You will never see a cable in your car, but I can tell you, there are 25 cables probably in your car. And we are capable of making all of them. We have plants across India, 18 plants. We have a plant of course, now with this new acquisition, we have got another 5 plants extra to add on. So, but the point is that we have got a pan-world network. One of the requirements of automotive customers is to have local footprints of manufacturing and warehousing. So far, we have been mostly made in India, warehoused anywhere in the world. But with this acquisition, we will be making in 3 other low-cost destinations so that the customer is comfortable that they are de-risking a single country risk as well. So that's what we are offering to our customers with the recent acquisition, which I think will be probably game changer for Suprajit in the next 5 years or so. Another example, I think what's rightly said, we started a two-wheeler cable maker beginning of the century. 97% of our business was in two-wheelers. But by next year, I think we will have less than 25% of our business will be in two-wheelers. It's not that I lost the business of two-wheelers. That business has greatly grown, but we have superbly grown the other businesses that we have had. Similarly, at the time, I had 1% share of global business in my sales. But by next year, I think nearly 60 or 65% of our business will be outside of India, and only 30-35% of the business will be made in India. This is a little bit of thing I heard that there are some shareholders, some of them came and talked to me. I'm not talking about those my uncles and aunts who have put 2,000, 3,000 rupees. They're all multi-crore today because the way their business has grown and their 100 or 200 shares have become probably 2 or 3 lakhs or 10 lakh shares today, and you can easily value them. I'm proud of it because it has created wealth for me, not only just for me and my family, but I think my larger family have also been benefited largely. And so are the shareholders. These are some of the numbers, how we have grown our wealth. We listed in Bombay Stock Exchange at a market cap of 10, 12 crores. Way back in 2003, today, our market cap is well known. So now I'll move to the main subject that I wanted to talk about. This has been the big dilemma with me when I was in my 40s as to What next? I was working hard. I think it was about 20 years of work. I had reached some stage. At the time, I was the largest two-wheeler cable maker in India, of course. So I was wondering, what next? How do I de-risk my business? One of the biggest risk for businesses is the key man risk. If you're the only guy who knows everything in your business, you are the biggest risk for your own business. Because if you're not there, the business is not going to be there. So also, at the top, it is very, very difficult as to how we deal with certain hard decisions in terms of the future of your company. It is truly, it's famously said it's lonely at the top, because your deepest worries about whether it's succession or de-risking, you are very difficult to say or talk to anybody. Whom will you talk about your deepest problem as to what happens to me tomorrow? How am I going to do it? Are you going to tell your spouse she or he will hit the roof? Why are you worried about it? But it is true, right? You talk about what happened in Bangalore a few days ago. He was just 46-year-old, just collapsed. So we never know what's in store for us. So it's important that we work with people whom we can trust. I cannot talk about my deepest worry with my managing director. I can talk to a trusted friend. I can talk to a trusted advisor, because they will have a completely neutral view on whatever I have to say. But my next in command may have an ulterior thinking on that. So it's important at that level to have some trusted friend, advisor who is willing to listen to you, your all problems. May not have a solution, but at least you will lighten your load, your mind, your heart, so that you can probably find someone together to talk. So it's a very difficult journey. The succession planning happens in three ways. One is at the management, one is at the board, and of course at the family level. At the board level, I wouldn't speak today because it's mostly relating to public companies. Shashikirana talked about his board. It's an important succession planning at the board as well, but it's mostly relates to a public company, so I wouldn't talk about it. I'll probably talk just about my thought process on management succession. I will probably go there. Yeah, before that, I think I'll also talk about how the whole process started. What got me thinking? We all agree Dhirubhai was the greatest entrepreneur probably this country has produced. But when he passed away, he left without a succession plan. You can imagine such a successful person not having a plan in place and assumed that his two sons will work together for the rest of their lives. And what happened is well known. You also know how one person scaled such heights and how the other person, as Mr. Rai said about debt, he sort of drowning in the debt today, right? But if they had planned it well together, you can imagine how big that organization or the group could have been. But that thought was not in the mind of the patriarch or the promoter. That is one classic case. There are many classic cases, but this is this happened, I think, 2003 or 4. I was still in my 40s or something like that, or maybe, I don't remember now. But anyway, so I said that, okay, what do I do? I first wrote my will when I was 42 or 43-year-old. Of course, I rewrote it multiple times, and we did a lot of things after that in terms of succession planning. But I think if you put your hand on heart, I am not asking anybody to lift the hands, I think probably 50% of people here have not written your will or certainly not planned the succession. I think that's the mistake. I think the biggest elephant in the room, particularly in a family where there are multiple family members, multiple uncles, aunts, their children are involved. If you have not planned it when you are the boss, it would be almost impossible to achieve in the successive generations. So it's important for the current Karta or the patriarch or the key promoter to put this in place, according to me. On the management today, the last 15 years of my effort was to de-risk myself as a key man. Today I got only two people reporting to me, my CFO and my global managing director. We have multiple managing directors, CXOs and CEOs, but none of them technically report to me, but I have access to them when I want. We have a system where we have regular weekly reviews, a monthly review, a budget meet, a CAPEX review. Everything is in place, but there's only two people report to me. So I can still today go to my golf game at least a couple of times a week. I take days off when I want to take off. But at the same time, we have a complete focused attention on what our group is doing. Sitting in Bangalore in my corporate office. My children don't report to me. They report to the managing director only. They are getting groomed, yes, but they are not getting groomed by me. They are getting groomed by a CEO, a CXO, a board member, an outside advisor. That's the way we need to bring the next generation into the business. How I went about it, I think one of the best places to be today, I think, in is places like CII has got a family business network. It's a part of CII. They have wonderful programs. I read a lot of books. I think particularly this John Ward is an excellent professor from IMD and Chicago Booth School, I think. He has written some very interesting small books. They're just 100 pages, just a little like a notebook you can put in your pocket and go. But they are filled with wisdom of his knowledge of how globally family businesses are run, how it is managed, how succession plan is done. Excellent books to read. I had the opportunity of interacting with some of the Indian gurus. Professor Kavil Ramachandran is the head of family business at ISB. I have worked with him. We are, in fact, writing a couple of case studies. In fact, recently, he also works on strategy. Our strategy of de-risk and grow profitably, which is what was responsible to where we are today, has recently been actually been published in Harvard Business Review. And we are working on one more paper on succession planning today. So he is another excellent guru on succession planning. But I also met some of the family business leaders who are in the fourth or fifth generation of building businesses together as a family. And I try to understand how they are able to manage these businesses, either through family charters or through family constitutions. And they have been all very successfully be able to sort of continue their businesses without families having internal conflicts. So I had a lot of good learning from them on this. So I imbibed some of that as well. And then of course there are a few advisors who, when we did our family constitution about 7-8 years ago, I involved all my children. We didn't take an advisor. Okay, let me also tell you this. I mean, I hope there are no family advisors here. A lot of them work on hourly basis. We don't want them. We want somebody whom you can trust to start with. In my case, I worked with my family first. I never brought an advisor in the beginning. I would say draft of how we want our family to run our business. Then I involved some experts. I talked to family business owners. I spoke to Ram. I spoke to, Professor Ramachandran. I spoke to people like Ashwini, Anil Sainan. There's a lot of people who are experts in that. They will tell you what you are not covered, what you have covered, and how you need to, improve on it or cover all the points that you have not done. So with that, we, went ahead with your family constitution, which is fairly complex. I will shortly touch on it. But I think it's important that the family is involved in some of these discussions. I talked about writing a will. If somebody has not written a will, if you're in 40 plus, please write a will at least. Then you can rewrite 100 times, nothing is going to stop you. But if you're not done, I would like you to say that take me a white paper of 1 page and write what you want to write, and then get somebody to sign as a witness. It will at least tell your next generation what was in your mind. Otherwise, they don't even know it. There are quite a few ways. Of course, if it's a simple business, if you have got few assets and a little business to give to your son or daughter, it's much simpler. You write a will and forget it, it's okay. But if you're a little larger family where there are some more people are involved, there are more than one generation is involved. If it is a small business, you can even have a simple family charter, discuss together, agree on how we will operate your business, who will take what responsibilities, what remunerations, what kind of perks, what kind of next generation issues. You can just make a 2-3 page document amongst yourself if the relationship is good. That's good enough. But of course, for a much larger companies, public companies, where there are multiple generations are involved, a constitution is a much more formal way of deciding how the succession planning will be. That's what the way I went about it, because I felt that with 3 sons and their children, maybe in another generations to come, we should set a roadmap for them to know, so that they know what they're in for if they want to come to the business. There is no compulsion in my charter to anybody to come into business. Today only 2 of my kids are with me. The other one wants to do something different. He is somewhere else, doing something else. It's fine. They will have some kind of ownership through the trust, but they don't have to be with the family business. That doesn't mean that they get disowned. No, that's not the issue. So when it is a larger complex thing, we need to have a family constitution, which ours is something like a 60-70 page book, which gets into every issues, right from remuneration to succession planning, mentoring, education, what is the responsibility, how they will come up in the organization going forward. Everything has been written down in a general, fairly clear way. So, of course, it is important that the first generation takes the lead, because it's very important that the first people respect the first generation. So they are willing to agree to certain things. But if the first generation is not there, the next generation will find it harder to have a common agenda, because there will be, please understand, when you're talking next generation, you're talking about the spouse, you're talking about the children, there is a different dynamics involved. So it is necessary that when the promoter, the karta, the main guy who's the key man is still in best of health, that is the time to do all these things. I'll talk a little bit about our constitution. It's a very personal, private document, so I won't go into the details, but I'll tell you what is in the constitution. There are basically 3 segments in the constitution of ours. One is there is a family council, there is a family business board, and then there is a trust. We're a public company, it's a public knowledge. We have moved most of our stock into a trust. We still have some small shareholding on an individual basis, but everything gone into trust. When I say when it's gone into trust means, once I am not there, nobody will own the shares. It's all a trust property. You will enjoy the income of the trust, but you don't have the right to the ownership of the company. The trust will forever own the company shares. The family council is basically everybody, the lineal descendants, the spouses, children, all of them. It is basically to work on, your annual holiday, you want to have birthday celebration, you want to go out for something, you want to have an understanding as to how the children are growing up, which is a good school, talk about mentoring the children, talk about giving them some gyan about what colleges to go. It's basically a family fun togetherness kind of a scenario. And then there is a family business board which will only talk about business. And it will talk about how the businesses will be run. They will represent the family's interest in the main board. For example, in Suprajit, we have an independent board where there are majority are independent, but we have 3 family members. So they will represent the interest of the family in the board. Our view is that at this moment, as you know, I have about 4 years ago de-linked the chairman and managing director's position by making it 2 separate positions. I believe that the managing director or the group CEO would be a non-family man. He is today, and I think he will be for a while. The family will give directions, have clear views on what are the do's and don'ts of the family in terms of the business, what kind of leverage you can have in the family businesses, who will help them in getting new good directors on the board. Generally, oversight on things like capex, allocation of capital, how to make sure that the disciplines and systems are in place, mentoring. There are quite a few areas we have identified as what the board directors from the family will be responsible. At the same time, they will also be part of the trust. So the trust will invest the money, the income into instruments that will further enhance the wealth of the family. Then there is a very clear idea as to how that wealth will be, or the income will be distributed to the family member, how much to each one, what is for CSR. All of these things will be is all put it in a clear document. So ultimately, is this the final? I don't know. I don't think so also, because ultimately it is for the people to implement what we think. We should do what we must. What will happen after we are gone, I don't know. Nobody can say anything about it. But once the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren see what the great-grand had to say in the family constitution and why he did it, we had a nice, messages from the seniors of the family to the next generation. They will understand from what kind of a status of humbleness we have come to where we are, and that they have that onerous responsibility to continue that tradition going forward. So this is how we have structured our family constitution. One of the biggest problem for us as entrepreneurs, as promoters, as business owners, is the problem of letting go and ego. I mean, we all have ego, but the question is when the ego becomes problematic for the business. Letting go is the biggest challenge, because we think we are the best in everything. I think 20 years ago, I thought I was the best purchase manager, best business manager, best finance manager, best of everything. But today I know I am not. When I let go and when I see the other guys doing a better job than me, I feel that, that is what needs to be done if you want to grow. Certainly, as a one-man show, you can grow to a certain level. How Mr. Shashikiran Shetty has grown to the level he is. Certainly, without delegation, without having people to manage those businesses. If he is wanting to do everything himself, I'm sure he wouldn't be there where he is today. It's the same thing in your business. If you have to grow your business, you need to delegate. You have to have the controls, you have to have systems in place. All that is agreed. So that is the biggest risk. I already talked about the key man risk. And then to do all of this, you need time to think. If you are from morning till night, if you are worried about your day-to-day issues, you never have time to sit back, relax, think as to what is that you need to do in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. So, of course, what is my role? One of the biggest things is, what do I do if I let go and somebody else doing? What am I going to do? Today, I'm very clear that at least in my role as the chairman, I know where I'm going to interfere in the company's operation and where I'm not. At the same time, for the balanced time, I know what I'm going to do. I am very clear and I am full today, despite I have taken a step back. My plate is full with the activities that I wanted to do all my life. So that's where I will end my talk, just to give some pictures of my family. I should show that. Yeah, this is in 2018 when we signed our family constitution. You will see my 3 sons and Supriya, my wife, signing. For the first time, she wore our company uniform. Otherwise, she doesn't wear, of course. She doesn't come to the factory. And this is what I would like to leave behind you as a thought. What is the legacy you want to leave behind? So thank you very much for your time.
But, implementing that and making it very serious affair in the family and with your board and the other people, that itself is, quite a work going forward. Otherwise, create a document and then
Yes, agreed.
Don't implement it is it doesn't. And one other thing I think you have very rightly said, that we can't control from the top.
Yes.
You can do what best you could.
Yes,
right?
and then leave it to rest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you implement it and make it serious and make it ongoing?
In terms of constitution, we say once in 3 years we have to critically look at it and see whether what we have said 3 years ago or signed off 3 years ago is still relevant today. We meet once in 6 months. It's sort of a combined meeting. There is also a trust. The family business board is also on the trust. Right now, they are the same people. So where we discuss the financial matters of the trust and where we invest, what is the return, how we are distributing the thing. At the same time, we also talk about how the businesses are running, where we need to look at it. But then because right now it's a small family, we still talk every day. Not every day, let's say every other day we are all together. Every week we have a family meal together. It's like written in stone. The kids are not with me, but on a Friday or a Thursday, we will meet for a meal together, whatever happens. That's unwritten law. So at the time we discuss everything. So it's more like an informal formal. We also have without mentioning the name, a dear, very senior South India's, I would say most leading family, the patriarch, not patriarch, he's the 4th generation actually, to advise us. He's a dear family friend, and anything that we need to discuss, he's always available to us. So we bounce out ideas as to what things are and how things are changing. I mean, when 4 or 5 years ago, when we talked about it, one of the things that he told is that, Rajit, it is time that you separate chairman and manager. I mean, it's kind of advice that he gave, which was in my mind too. So I said, okay, now we already had hired a president at the time who was a CEO but not on the board, brought him on the board, looked at him as a perfect fit. 2 years ago, he became the managing director. And now it's very clear that that position will be segregated out. And we are also saying today that there will be a professional, unless the children really prove to the satisfaction of the independent board, not the family board, that they are capable of running the business as the CEO. We are only saying that you be director on the board and take strategic decisions. Akhilesh is the chief strategy officer. He led this Kongsberg deal, for example. So they are all getting groomed, but there is not a mandate that they will become the managing director. They can, because we are all professionals. Akhilesh did his engineering in the US, it went to London Business School. He has the qualification, but does he have the capability to deliver a 3,000 or a 4,000 crore company? It's time will tell. I don't know. Today I don't know. Today I got a solid CEO in place. So that's how, So, but these things are discussed. They all know what we internally have agreed 2-3 years ago, that this is how we will run. So we are saying that, okay, is there need to be change? So far, we have not changed the constitution. It's only 3 years into it.
Hi. My question is, who inspired the most as a business leader in your private and personal domain, and which made you to feel as a fantastic family council you have written? It's an ideal example to...
Sorry, I didn't get the second part.
To inspire this family council written also. It is one of the interlinked thing. Today we have seen the biggest conglomerate like Tata's. We have seen the...
Mr. Tata, Ratan Tata.
Ratan Tata and Cyrus
He is an absolute leader for us too.
True, yeah. When I'm saying
I would say he is the answer to your question.
No, but again, there is a conflict to it that Cyrus Mistry and Tata rift happened in the family trust. There is a strong bond in that, and there is a mentor's way there. So having that said, so who inspired the most? And any book you referred, or is that something, I could see the 4 anecdotes in your presentations, 4 anecdotes. Is that inspired?
I think a lot of people inspire you. Let me tell you, right from beginning, I'm going back, I don't know how much time I've got. When I first started, I didn't know anything. I went to Divanna. I used his office for a year. He inspired me because he was doing so well. The first public company in those days listed, one of the first. So I used his office, and I could sit with him in the evening after his office hour and talk about my issues and problems. And I could pick his brain. My father-in-law, My father-in-law was a great inspiration to me. There is no hesitation to say an in-law is bad. No, he is not. He is a fantastic guy. And the amount of time I could spend with him. There are a couple of business leaders I don't want to mention because they are very low profile in this. The best-in-class business leaders, ultimate in focused, what I would call as diligent leaders who have done fantastically well in their groups. I can pick up the phone and talk to them. They are the business leaders for me. Different peoples are different. I mean, there are global leaders who have done so well. So I think it is ultimately your own personal belief what you want to do and how you want to execute that.
Of course, this is not directed to connect to succession plan. This is my question related to your business. Because today, you know that you are predominantly in the automobile business. You know, that automobile business is taking revolutionary change. You know, from existing the diesel or the petrol system, everything is going to be e-vehicle.
Yes.
So how you are going to take that challenge in the overall, because you have got so many factories and everything put together, you got technology, R&D, you know that this is the biggest challenge which is happening for the entire automobile industries. What is the kind of, plan of action you have, to face this challenge?
Set up a small Suprajit technology cell. Few engineers working on non-cable, non-lighting products. Today, we have a full-fledged center. I think 2-3 months ago, we also put a business update because we are a public company. We launched a new Suprajit Innovation Center in Bangalore, in a new place. My second son, Ashutosh, who did his master's in Bristol in UK, he heads that. They are only looking at future products for the company. They are not looking at the current products. What is going to change? Yes, you are right, EV, autonomous, studies, autonomous driving. Where is it that the future requirement will be there, which will be an extension of either our products or completely new technology? So you have got a fairly large electronic cell today. How do you work on thumb throttles? How do you work on digital speedometers? How do you work on electronic, EMAs? These are the products we are already working. They are already in testing with some of our customers. So, first of all, cable is not going to go away. By the way, it's going to be there for a long period of time. But we are also working parallelly for new products for the future.